Can you get a car that's just as good as the Grom with more features for just a little over half the price? Today, we're gonna find out. This is the brand new WLToys 184008, and with coupon, you can get this thing for 80 bucks. It's brushless, all metal drivetrain, and has a bunch of really cool features. First of all, I think this body looks pretty good. They've got a little bit of extra greebling on here, big wing hanging off the back. We've got some skid plates in the top, a skid plate in the front. This body is clipless. And you can see if we take it off, it's connected with a wire to some lights front and rear. We'll check out those lights in just a minute. Underneath here, you can see we've got a brushless motor with a brushless ESC, a 3-wire servo, and a nice little lipo. This car is nearly all plastic. It's got a plastic chassis, plastic arms. There are aluminum reinforcements for the hinge pins in the front and rear. You can see here we've got Phillips screws all the way throughout. The wheels and tires look pretty good. I like this kind of fake aluminum detail on here. These are obvious clones of Traxxas sledgehammers. They do not have foams in them. The wheels look pretty strong, and they are 12mm hexes. Connected to those wheels, we've got all metal CVDs in the front and dog bones in the rear. I believe we've got all metal differential gears. We're gonna pull one of these diffs here in a minute and check that out. We've got fluid-filled shocks, but it doesn't feel like there's much fluid in them. We'll probably fill those up here in a minute as well. You can see we've got a cooling fan for the ESC and a teeny tiny little brushless motor here. All the suspension links are plastic and they're nice and flexible, but as you can see here, unfortunately, we've got bushings out here at the wheels instead of bearings. This little guy is 1/18 scale, and size-wise, you can see it is about the exact same size as the Grom. It does sit just a little bit shorter. Ground clearance is very similar, though the tires are a little bit bigger than the Groms, which should help it with off-road handling. Now, this is an updated version of the WLToys A949 chassis, which means that spare parts should be readily available for it. Let's take a look and see if these gears are all metal or not. All right, time to get the power driver. So one big disadvantage to this car over the Grom is this thing has many screws of many different sizes, so you need to keep track of them when you're taking it apart. Now, how often you'll have to take this thing apart is gonna depend on how durable it is, and we're gonna find out how durable it is here in just a little bit. We're also gonna find out how fast it goes. With this central top plate removed, we can see we've got an aluminum drive shaft with some bearings here, a plastic spur gear, and a brass pinion gear. You can just pop these shocks off the ball studs, but I've found it's better to go ahead and pull the ball studs out because that way it doesn't put too much stress on the tops of the shocks and it makes them less likely to pop off during bashing. As you can see, compared to the MJX Hypergo, this is a reasonably simple design and a little bit easier to take apart. You can see those steel dog bones in the rear, and here's the differential. As you can see here, this ring gear is actually made of zinc, it's not steel. That's probably okay for the size of this car though. Now that being said, the Grom ring gears are technically steel, though I'm not really sure what kind of steel that is. Let's take a look inside. We do have steel output cups, which is an advantage over the Groms, which are plastic. We do have bearings on the differential as well, which means the only place that has bushings is out here at the wheels. That's not too bad because the wheels don't really spin that fast. I would upgrade these to bearings though. Now taking a look inside here, we can see we've got a grease-filled metal gear differential. Again, an advantage over the stock Grom differential. Let's get this back together. I want to see what those lights look like. But before we do that, we got to get these shocks figured out because this is unacceptable. Let me show you how much bounce we get here. Now let's put some oil in there and I'll show you the difference. Before we put oil in these shocks, I want to make sure they actually can take oil. So let's look in the manual and make sure that they've got seals in them. Okay, you can see here that they are double sealed on the bottom and they have a bladder on the top. So these are definitely designed to have oil in them. Whether or not they'll actually hold oil, that's a different story. Now we've got a lot of really fun projects coming up in the future. And if you're not subscribed, you might miss them. So why don't you go ahead and get subscribed and turn on that bell to get notified. As you can see there, it's wet, but there's not a drop of oil in there. I've got no idea what weight oil will be best for this. Let's start out with some 40. I'm not sure that's gonna be thick enough. Let's put it together and find out. Okay, that doesn't really feel like there's any oil in there. We might need to go a little bit thicker, but we'll try this first. Now, hopefully these things aren't empty because they didn't want to put oil in them for fear that it would leak out, but I guess we're gonna find out. Okay, that does feel a lot better. Still pretty thin, but let's go with that. Just need to do the rears now. Ended up going with 80 weight in the rear and 40 weight in the front. I think the rear could still use more, but that being said, it's definitely better than it was. I think we're gonna have to give one big point to the Grom on this one though. The shocks on the Grom are much better and will probably come filled with oil. The listing for this thing on Banggood where I got mine said it'll do 60 kilometers an hour. That's 37 miles an hour. And that's with this little 2-cell 1200 milliamp hour battery. I'm not super convinced about that, but let's get this thing charged up, see what these lights look like, and then see how fast it is. To control it, we're gonna be using this new transmitter that I haven't seen before. It's got a thumb control for the steering wheel, sponge on the steering wheel, and this really nice feature that's super handy for me, which is a phone holder. Other than that, it's very basic, takes 4 AAA batteries, and feels cheap. All right, let's see just how fast you'll go. Tires are a little slippery in this wet. Okay, 29 miles an hour. That's certainly not the claimed 37 miles an hour, but 30 miles an hour is plenty fast enough for a little car like this, especially on a small 2S brushless system, and it is 10 miles an hour faster than the Grom is out of the box. These tires didn't really do well on the pavement, but that pavement is also very wet right now, so I don't really blame the tires too much. The really important thing is how this handles off-road, which we're gonna check out in a minute, but before we do that, I don't really like this giant wing hanging off the back. I think it's too big for the car, so let's see if we can do something about that. I don't know, guys. I think it looks better without the big wing hanging off the back, but now there's something missing in the back. Might need to get one of these front bumpers for the back as well. That's also helped the weight distribution a little bit and should help it bash better. Speaking of which, let's see how this thing bashes. Well, she handles off-road pretty well and jumps well too. None of that matters if this thing isn't durable, so now it's time for... So what did we break? This is the result of a couple of packs of bashing, and the body still looks basically perfect. Everything in the rear is good. My trimmed down wing still looks fine. Drivetrain is fine. We did break part of the steering right here. That's a known weak point on these vehicles. And somehow I managed to bend one of these wheels. Again, not a big deal. These wheels aren't the best anyway, but they certainly work fine out of the box. So do I think this WLToys is a better buy than this Arrma Granite Grom? Well, it really depends. The Granite Grom is going to be a higher quality car. It's going to be a bit easier to work on, but especially with the coupon I have down in the description, that coupon does not give me any kickbacks. It's not an affiliate link, just here to help you out. This thing is almost half the price, and it's brushless, it's faster, it's better equipped, and one of the best things about it is because this is based on the A949 platform, upgrades are plentiful and cheap. You can get an entire aluminum upgrade kit for this thing for less than $50. That includes towers, the rack, and a bunch of other parts. That's going to be a lot cheaper than upgrading this Granite Grom, where one upgrade can cost you $50. Now that being said, you're definitely making some compromises here. Obviously, you're not going to get as high a quality vehicle. You're not going to get the support that you would get from Horizon, but at just a little over half the price, this makes a very compelling argument for buying. Another thing I think you're going to find compelling are some of the videos I've got coming up, so why don't you go ahead and get subscribed, hit that bell to get notified, and check out one of these videos.